All right, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak tonight. Can you hear me? Yes. I will keep trying to project my voice as much as possible. So, for those of you who don't actually know Blackheath and Greenwich, I just added this slide. So we have London here, and that's southeast. So you have the amazing green spaces of Greenwich Park and Blackheath itself, cut by the A2 there. So you can see the kind of parallel and in scale how big it is compared with Battersea Park, Regent's Park and Hyde Park. Here it's also just to give you a sense of the topography of the place. So we have the heath as a high level ground, the enclosed park with all the mature trees, and then the curve of the Thames at the base of Greenwich. The build-up area is Blackheath Village. It also connects with the Cater Estate, which is a residential area at the back. So this was just to kind of place you geographically within London. So I broke today's talk in 3 parts. So I'm just going to briefly talk about the research process and the team, and then the actual architects and buildings, and then a little bit of lessons learned, and also feedback, because it's been a year yesterday that the book actually was launched in a private event in Blackheath. So the team, it took me about 7 years to do this book, so it was a lot of people involved to help make it happen. So my husband, Ian, actually did all the drawings. So we've been, going to archives, tracing, drawing over, and I had other people helping, but in the end, he was the one who created the graphic language that you see in the book. So this is just a selection of the elevations after we've done plans. And then we realized, by the way, we also need site plans. So we kept feeding in with more and more. And when you look at the book, there's 2 copies for you to see here on display. You will see the drawings are a big part of it. Then the bigger team, Neil Bigham, who gave you a lecture on Patrick Gwynne a few months ago, was my mentor and actual architectural historian, because I come from the background of actually practicing. Heidi Seaton is a sociologist, so she actually we worked a lot on the planning context and cultural background of the period. Studio Blackburn was the graphic designers who created the beautiful orange brick you can see. And all of these 3 people live in a span house, so you will see next what that is. Fraser, also the editor, lives in Span. And then Piers Scorfield was the photographer that I commissioned the new photography to. He's not from South London, but he came all the way from Islington. And then Park Books, who made it all possible, the publishers. So, looking first at the people, this is just a very kind of informative map. It's from South London Architects and RIBA branch from May 1973. And there was a piece about, where are our members? And you can see SC3 with a huge concentration of architects. A scary way of visualizing this is that if you did a triangulation of SC3, there would be an architect every 200 meters, which is pretty shockingly scary. The only other parallel is kind of Richmond and Teddington. And the conclusion, after they analyzed this data, was that a promising line of investigation suggests that to lure and entrap architects, you need either Span or Georgian, or best of all, a mixture of the 2, like in Blackheath. So, It's not as bad today. There's still a huge community of designers and architects, but yeah, it was very intense in the 60s and 70s. Why? So there are kind of four main reasons for this phenomenon that the book tries to capture. We have amazing existing architectural excellence, a very special topography, which you don't find anywhere else in London, a lot of post-war opportunity, and then a mix of people and their connections who really created a special phenomenon. So this is the old Naval College in Greenwich, just to give you a feeling of, why would you want to, go to work and pass by these buildings every day. Again, for people who are not too familiar with the area, what was this existing architectural excellence historic? We have the Royal Observatory, Morden College by Wren, St Alphegis Church, Hawksmoor at the base of Greenwich, Vanbrugh Castle, the Paragon, one of the most amazing crescents in London. So all of these 1600s, 1700s. Then we have the Queen's House, Inigo Jones, Old Royal Naval College, Wren, Hawksmoor, Thomas Ripley, John Rowan School, so Neo-Georgia, 1920s. Swain Court, I added that one over there, 1937, just to show there wasn't actually a lot of modernism, as in early modernism, 1930s. But in 37, a kind of light Art Deco came into Blackheath, and that was the reason for the creation of the Blackheath Society, to fight the 30s arriving and modernism arriving in the area. Greenwich Town Hall, a beautiful tower, very much a Dutch inspired design by Clifford Colpin. So it's in this setting. And now this is just another image of special topography. I mean, there's not many places where you have this contrast of a completely bare heath, where you just have the sky, the fresh air, the open space, the potential that gives for activities all the time, and just freedom and running and cycling and things like that. And then the enclosed, beautiful Greenwich Park with their mature trees and beautiful way of going down and finding the river. And so this is what the scope of the book and developed as. So we have the Cater Estate, very concentrated area of modern buildings that we will see on Saturday, and then you have all around Greenwich Park and the Heath, and then the old Greenwich area and the river Thames at the end there. So I selected 64 buildings overall. In terms of post-war opportunity, this is the bomb damage map. Because the Heath was such a high spot, and it was on the line of arrival for the bombers from the south, it was full of bomb defenses, and it was heavily bombarded. So you can see some of the bombs on the Heath. Also damage on the Paragon, the crescent on the top, and much more damage. And on the very kind of light area, not dense at all, was the Cater Estate, which was an estate that had been in private ownership by, a family controlled the land. And it was still very much agricultural land. So all these pockets, so agricultural land and bomb damage, created this special opportunity. And then people and their connections. So this was the first list I did about 8 years ago, or 9, when I'm Portuguese, so I moved to the area actually 20 years ago now. But I just, the buildings were talking with me, so you can see what there's so many special things here. I need to research this more. So I started to do lists to understand who built what, who designed what, and this was the first list. As things progressed, I realized there were about 5, 6 key individuals who had really created a network of relationships that gave, so many buildings to the area. So we have Peter Moro, Trevor Dennett, Walter Greaves, Eric Lyons, Patrick Gwynne, and Gordon and Ursula Boyer. What links these people is the Polytechnic, the Regent Street Polytechnic, is the Festival of Britain. So they were all, Peter Moro was responsible for the interiors of the Royal Festival Hall, for example. Trevor Dennett was a student of Peter Moro. Walter Greaves was a student of Trevor Dennett, and Gordon and Ursula were students of Peter Moro. Patrick Gwynne was designing homes for Bilsby, and Eric Lyons as well. So, all this is a constellation from the book, so you can see how people related with each other. There were friendships, students and teacher relationships, and work. And then many of them designed their own homes. So those little symbols are architect design own homes, or they lived in span. So not only this architectural excellence was there historic, there was also span. So the new modern homes that were attracting these young architects who couldn't afford North London, but were looking for a modern house and a new environment to live. So, because there are so many of them, I can't really tell you all the exciting tales, but buy the book and then you will know more. So these are the research was basically done by first putting letters through people's doors and interviewing all of the residents, interviewing the descendants of the architects, the practices, the new residents that had relationships with the original who commissioned the works, and talking with many of the architects themselves who are still alive, which I was lucky to interview many of them. There's a mix of well-known names and the less known people. So that was the great thing to do, to merge those two worlds of the lesser known with the big practice names. So there's a lot of tales and lots of fun tea time with lots of these people. So I then did a selection of 64 exemplary buildings, but today I'm going to show you 8. So they represent a summary of the different typologies. So it was great to be able to feature both social housing, luxury homes, one-offs, middle-class suburban typologies. So these 8, I tried to capture the typologies that are featured. Very hard to choose, but I hope it gives you a true flavor. So I must start with Eric Lyons because span was the big magnet that brought most of these people to the area, together with all the other 4 reasons I tried to explain. So Eric Lyons and span, he was the consultant architect. So span was a company formed in the late 50s, active until the mid-80s, early 80s. And Lyons was a North London boy. He attended Regent Street Poly, and he first worked with Maxwell Fry, where he met Walter Gropius. So we have a proper descendant from the master here. He was always based near Hampton Court, where quite a few span estates are also built. And together, in his own practice of Eric Lyons and Partners, he also did other social housing, high-rise, all sorts of things. So he was the RIBA president in 75 and 77, and a very important person on better housing. So this is to show you the impact of SPAN in the area. So this is the Cater estate. As I told you, is a complex thing, but it's basically a bit like the Dulwich estate. It's a private estate within a residential area, not adopted roads, no public transport, no shops. And what they found here, so the sites you can see in 30 years, they completely changed the face of the urban fabric of this area. And these sites are a mix of agricultural land, allotments, and also bomb damaged homes that were replaced. So I'm just going to give you some bullet points because I might forget some of them. Overall, they built almost 500 dwellings in the area, so a huge impact. Tony Fretton a month ago mentioned SPAN. The higher art architects used to say, oh, this is just easy listening, modernism for the suburbs, which is fair enough. But the SPAN designing, the guiding principles were really interesting site layouts and arrangements. The house layouts themselves, they were systematically repeated and adapted. So, they would have a T2 and then a T2A and then a T2XB. So they were kind of always, every time they went to a new site, they were interested in systematic and efficient building types, but always trying something better. Very generous communal landscape, so the landscape as important as the buildings. Designing for both privacy and social opportunity. So there's a lot of communal spaces, and it's all about blurring the private and the public realms. Informal play, so you don't really see slides and swings. It's all about bits of wood that kids can use as they wish. Very strong positive and identity of place, seclusion, tranquility, and mainly introverted schemes, prioritizing people over vehicles. So not complete segregation, but very clear defined edges for cars and inner spaces for people. And then community self-management by resident committees. Lyons was very keen on this. He always set up the community committees. He was there. He was doing all the minutes for a few years until he felt the people were ready. So we usually have the tree officer, the landscape officer, the building maintenance officer, the treasurer, all of that. So this was just to introduce you to SPAN as a development company. And I will just show an example. So in 1957, so quite early on, they tried to create a type T3 of a house, which is a 3-story house. And this is the layout of the hall. So the hall is a estate that was developed over 10 years. The main reason is that there was a hall, which was a Victorian villa, and it was actually left to rot by SPAN. And about 20 years later, Cunningham, one of the partners, did say, I regret now, on hindsight, we could have just saved that building. So if we were thinking in the 90s or today, we would have just tried to integrate an historic building within the site. But he said, 57, we just wanted a complete start, a clean slate. So there was a lot of fights, planning, public inquiries, and so on. So what we have is a mix. The first wiggly bit is flats. Then there are terrace housing, 2 stories, 3 stories and flats again on top, but you can just see the sense of master planning and a very big communal green, and also how much of open space is given in comparison to the build. So the little 3 isolated blobs there are these. They are actually listed. They only built 3 in the end because it was actually not viable commercially. And the 2-story houses and the flats continued to offer what the market needed and what people wanted. But this is the elevation of the T3s. So they had a spiral staircase connecting the 3 stories. They have an internal courtyard and a private front patio as well. Just very clever, very well designed. So this, you can see the patio to the right, the connection, the visual connection to the staircase on that clerestory window, the light coming through. And this is a house of ideas. So it was exhibited as the 1957 House of Ideas. It's just interesting to see they had the whole number 1, the block club flats, and they had the kind of master plan planned at the back. The houses were on the top, and the whole, the Victorian big building, was still in the middle, just waiting for demolition. That's one of the images from the House of Ideas, which shows the back with that kind of French Riviera feel. The second example is at the model of Span, Andrews, Emerson, and Sherlock, who actually were Islington architects, so they didn't have a lot of links with Blackheath. You had a talk a year ago about Harley Sherlock, which was a great talk, so you would know about it a bit more. They were quite interested in Span as a business model. So what people had to do in these days was create their own opportunities. So they would have created housing associations and get the loans, buy the sites, build, sell. You know, the architect was finding their own opportunities because it was quite hard to get commissions. And that's what they did in Ranger Square. So they create their own housing society, won a Civic Trust Award, and these are the houses. So what they did, the scheme, the site had planning for a tower. I'll show you the layout. So this is on the bank of Greenwich, overlooking the city and the river. And it's quite an introverted, the middle of a quarter site. And it had planning for a tower that the council wasn't able to deliver. So they bought the site, but they were very strongly opposed to building at height. So they were all about high density, low rise. So these houses are only 3.2 meters wide. So it was a big exercise on minimal space living. There's 33 of them, and they already tested them in Putney in another development, and they were perfectly happy, and is a very successful place. So compact living, high density, low rise, working with the site levels, and giving you your front door and your sense of community with the central green. That's 1970. So then we have one of the main, UK's leading post-war architectural practices. You might have heard of Chamberlain, Powell and Bon. They were in between. They had just finished Golden Lane Estate for the City of London. The Barbican was about to start, and they entered into they were invited by Greenwich Council to develop the Vanbrugh Park estate. So the Vanbrugh Park estate is on the edge of the heath towards the Greenwich side. And as Golden Lane estate has some similarities, so they were obviously working in that kind of typology and, developing sites of a similar scale. So you can see here the site layout. That little square on top is the tower, which is actually only 8 stories. So it's just more like a marker in the landscape. And then you have a mix of 2- and 3-story houses and garages with flats above. So it's quite, again, a high density but low rise solution. The tower is that plan, so beautiful centralized core with all the flats accessed and with the permeability through the center of the tower. Here you can see some of the flats above the garages, which is another typology they used. And the estate is fairly insular in the sense that they wanted to, create a Barbican-like environment where you go in and then you go out. So the entrances are marked by kind of tower of brickwork. There's also red brickwork all around that in a way mimics the historic walls of Greenwich Park. There was very ambitious landscape aims from Chamberlain, Powell and Bolling, including a lake at the base of the tower, which sadly the council filled as soon as they could because, maintenance was a bit tricky. This is one of the types, which is a 2-story, 3-bed house. There was no money, We're talking about breeze block exposed, no painting, nothing. Completely against design, codes. So they actually, in the end, had to paint the whole thing because it didn't have any U values or anything. So technically, it was quite a challenge to deliver, including the tower. But you can see what they were giving people, a beautiful interior, full flooded with light. So on the top floor, the bathroom and the landing have a higher level clerestory window, and the light just floods down. This is very much Alvar Aalto's studio, if some of you might know, from 36, where he has a staircase that wraps around a fireplace. So, it's just amazing that, we are limited in budget, but can we give something amazing and inspiring? And it's possible. Now we're going to a single family home, very much linked with Chamberlain, Powell and Bon, because both Mike Homan and Leo Rubinstein met whilst working at the Barbican Estate project. So they were both working on the residential detailing, and especially Mike Homan was into windows. Well, he was in the team detailing all of the Barbican windows. That's Mike Homan, by the way, smoking his pipe. So they met whilst working at the Barbican Estate. Mike Homan was a German émigré, and Leo Rubinstein was a Jewish refugee. And Leo found this piece of land through a partner he worked also after leaving the Barbican office. And he went to Michael and said, "Can you help me design my own home?" So they did this. So you can see a similarity on the window detailing, the exposed concrete and the beautiful dark brickwork. Mike Homan was also responsible for working on the team that designed the Barbican sink, the hand rings that kind of slots on the wall, if you know what I mean. I forgot to add a photo here. So they were quite ambitious for this site. The first drawings are actually for a Le Corbusier, a Mies van der Rohe floating glass box just on 4 columns of steel, but that was a step too far. So we still have a beautiful open space. So you can see in section there, this is on a steep off-point hill, which is one of the highest points on the heath, looking down over Greenwich. And you basically have 2 stories towards the lane and 3 stories towards the base. So it's all double aspect, 2 big brick walls, and then you can see the whole of the city in front of you. And these are photos from the time when the mid-60s, when the building was finished. There was the planning restriction of actually having a carport, because you had to provide a car parking space. So you can see the car would have the best view in London ever. But soon enough, the family enclosed the carport and extended with a larger kitchen, and is now fine because there's car parking at the base of the lane underneath. It leaks. It's the curse of the flat roof. There was an architect nearby who used to help the owners to maintain this house. And they kept saying, you can't live in a masterpiece and expect it not to leak. So now we go more into the kind of community project. So Royston Summers studied at the AA and then went on to work first in Cornwall, but then he came back to London and he set up his practice in Blackheath. So we lived in Span. He lived in South Row, which is that first, anyway, it's a beautiful span facing the heath. And together with other neighbours, they just said, we need more space. We need our own thing. So in the 60s, they developed a scheme. By 68, they moved in. And they did won a few awards, and it's great. So this is the view from the heath. It's a 7-unit scheme. They came together, created a kind of a cooperative housing group, and they bought a very old derelict villa, demolished it, and built 7 houses on it. So it's a bit hard to see, but the heath is just the open space at the front, and you can see the row of large Victorian villas and what would have been there. They basically filled it on an L shape with a block of 2 and a block of 5. And the triangle that is left over is communal gardens. So there's no private gardens. It's all about promoting interaction. So if you want to read, if you want to enjoy the outdoor, come out and meet your neighbors. There are terraces. There's balconies that are private. The 7 people that eventually came together, most of them from South Row. So most of them loved Span. They just wanted Span Plus. They filled the group with a few more. So you have Royston Summers at the beginning, the architect. Michael Frayn, the writer, was... Michael Frayn is the third from the right. The writer, he was also basically the person who dealt with all the paperwork. We had a solicitor to do the legalities. You had the builder who actually built the whole thing. You had a geologist, which was very useful to do soil testing, and a dentist. So we don't need anything else. Michael Frayn is over there, so that's his family in a publication, and the other photo is from Royston Summers' house, so you can see the beautiful staircase exposed. So they agreed on what the houses were going to look like, and the way they made it cheaper was by obviously repetition. And you can see, I mean, hard to see, but all the walls are lined in birch plywood, just 600 by 2.4, so it was just halves of board, so there's no waste, very rational design. Not great for sound transmission, because the floors are completely connected, like this. So the staircase is on the void. You have concrete for thermal mass, and you have the bricks for the beautiful dark bricks on the party walls. The top floor are the 4 bedrooms, and those wiggly lines are basically removable cupboards. And the idea is that every family could just decide if they had a big room to the front or a room and a dressing room. So there was flexibility there. So they're great homes. It was all about trying, to work with the fabric of the building in terms of heat loss and heat gain. And he is known to be walking around telling people to pull the curtains because it's getting cold, and now open the curtains because it's time to ventilate. And now, so yeah, he was a bit of a dictator. Now, I have a feeling he went to Oxford and went to see St. Catherine's Court by Jacobsen, which had been finished a few years before. So that's Jacobsen's college there, and this is North Several. So, I mean, the expressed party walls and literally the rhythm of the elevations is there. In 1977, he then also designed Lakeside in Isha, which is now conservation area, which is very much based on North Several, but even bigger and beautiful setting by the lake, by a lake. I mean, there's just a little funny anecdote here, but when Royston went to the RIBA to collect the medal for good design in housing for this project, he then went to also get his payment, his dole money, because, there was no money. So the milkman used to say, "Wow, you're very posh here." The wife is saying, "No, trust me, we're not." So, it was a tricky business to make ends meet. Julian Sofa. So we're getting almost there. So this is another modern residence. So this is a one-off. Julian Sofa was born in Iraq, in the Jewish community, but he eventually came through Bombay to the AA. And he actually worked for YRMM, but then he set up on his own quite early on. He worked mainly for LCC, GLC, social housing schemes, many schools, colleges, and mainly for the Jewish community in London. This is the only known house, so it's a Grade 2 listed building because, well, not only because it's amazing, but because it's also his only known domestic project. He always worked for, with a sense of social duty. So Meridian West was built for Brent Screeton was actually a paint businessman that was known to architects of the time because he used to specify all the good paints. So they actually owned a listed building at the back. This is in Diamond Terrace, which is at the base, very close to Greenwich Park. And they owned the listed building house at the corner. And they said, "Can you build us a modern building in our orchard?" So this is a 1-acre garden that you access from the lane. And what Julian designed for them was a pavilion-like building. So you can walk around the whole building. Is nested on the hill. So what you have is a lower ground where you come in and just have garage and studio, and then you go up and you have the rooms and the living room, and it's all connected to a semi-open staircase. Like this. So you use some of that space, but most of it is just, embedded in the hill. So we have exposed concrete, beautiful brickwork, and some wood. The detailing of the Iroko windows is really exquisite, and the architect who then bought the house lived there for 60 odd years, so he kept the windows in perfect condition, and this beautiful thing to see. Len Lewis. So now we have a more obscure architect. He lived in the plantation, which is a Span estate. They actually bought the show home, so they were very happy to keep all the cool Hills furniture that came with it. But the dream was to build his own home eventually, so they found a site nearby, again an orchard at the back of a big house, and they built it. Ian Morton Wright, who lived in Meridian West, actually studied with Len, and he said we used to call him Leonardo Lewis because he was so creative and his designs were always so inventive. He always worked for the LCC or for other hospitals and courts and public buildings. So this is his only home from 1967. He's only on the second family, so you could just see how special it is. Nobody wants to leave once you arrive. So simple blocks, interesting cretal windows, but the really exciting bit is the plan and the section. So you see there's a old historic building, and this would have been the orchard at the back. That's a shot from the interior. So you have 2 square blocks. This is living room and kitchen, and the bedrooms are at the back. So what we have is 2 squares linked by a linkway with the bathrooms, an entrance court, and the studio space. And the beautiful thing is the center of the living space is the solid flue. And in the 4 bedrooms, which are arranged like a pinwheel, it's actually a roof light. So that's the kind of elevation. So you have the light coming through to the center of the bedrooms, or the smoke going up in the solid core. It's just a beautiful home. Trevor Dennett, last one. So we ending with Trevor was actually, again, a key 20th century modern architect who managed a very successful practice. He first worked with Fry and Drew, and then he set up on his own. He was there for the Festival of Britain, like many of them were. But he was born into a Greenwich family, so he was actually a Greenwich lad. His uncle was an architect, Percy Dennett. He had done beautiful neo-Georgian buildings in the 80s. So I'll just leave you with one of the best from Trevor, which is the Blackheath Quaker Meeting House from 72, which is now listed and won a few awards, including Concrete Society. So we're talking about a brutalist, jewel-like design. So Trevor didn't really like the word brutalist because he said, I had spent so much time detailing all of the markings of the wood on that concrete. There's nothing brutal about it. It's like a jewel. It's like every detail is being thought to the millimeter. So what we have here is, at the end, we have Blackheath train station, and there was a big There was a big church which suffered enormous bomb damage, and then it was called to work on the refurbishment of the Congregational Church, which his family were attending. And this new commission came on the back of that because the Quakers couldn't use the smaller space anymore. So they said, what about us? Can you please design something for us without overshading the old church? So Trevor had been working in York designing another Quaker, very big school. So we had the connection there. And he was working with Ted Appold of U of Europe. So as the engineer-architect relationship was developing on a few projects here. The square plan with the chamfered corners creates clerestory light, that comes from above. And what was really important for Trevor on his religious buildings was this sense of spiral. So you arrive through there, is quite a low entrance hall, and then you kind of meander, and then as you enter in the space, you have this. You have a central lantern, very calm space. All the structure is exposed in tension, and the light comes from the central lantern only, and from that little sliver. So, the end. I have no idea what time it is, but hopefully it's okay. So buildings talk to us. That was my favorite bit. Come from Lisbon, arrive, what is going on? The people are mostly gone, but I can see a lot. So I recommend you all continue to explore the cities and look up and question what's going on. I also love that all the owners felt like guardians. So as I interviewed most of the residents, they all just said, well, I'm just looking after this. This is too special for me in a way. So I thought, wow, I never thought people would feel like that when buildings are this special. I mean, we all work upon and through each other. So these people were working for some people, were learning from, it's just such an interesting dynamic. So there's obviously tradition, and then all the influences that, make us develop interdependencies of who are inspiring, who do we work with, and what do we do. So I did want to call the book Tradition of Change, but nobody let me because the editors, my husband, everybody just said that doesn't mean anything. Just stop it. So, but I put it here because I still like that sense of all of this is about the fact that we are, everything is changing, but there is this tradition, continuous tradition of change. And actually, Peter Moro used this, or he's picked up in one of the books that talks about his house, because he was told by the council, please just be traditional, just keep to what is here, just copy this. And he said, no, I am traditional. I follow the tradition of change. Now, the leaders work alongside the invisible majority. So, I think now that we have enough historic distance from this period, we can start to celebrate also the minority and, the others. We all know Corbusier, we all know Maison de Rowe, we all know Chamberlain, Paul and Bond. What about all the other ones who are doing excellent work? Special normal. So this is actually a size that the graphic designer said, let's make the book in special normal. And I thought, wow, that's a great name. All these people are special normal. All these buildings are normal modernism and so special at the same time. And then when the more you research a building, the more you realize nothing is obvious. Who wanted this? Who paid for it? Who built it? Those are the three questions that create everything around us. Now, the book is a bit dry, so I wanted to people to try and read between the lines, because it's all about love and trust. I mean, you don't hire an architect over 40 years to design 4 houses for you without that relationship being unbelievably special. In terms of response, because the book came out a year ago, I did a few, interviews and articles, and Owen Atterley, we had a discussion for Open City, and in the end he said, why does this work? What is so good about this? And our conclusion was, it's the mix, isn't it? It's the fact that it's the right amount of span, it's the right amount of Georgian, it's the right amount of social, middle class and upper, and social councils and everything. The scale is just right, there's nothing that just feels complete, too big, too small, and then it's the fact that all these schemes are so well integrated in their context. They were all reading the context. Even if most of them are insular, they belong to the site. And this final image is the center of Cater Estate. So you have St. Michael's Church, which is a late Victorian building. You have the early Georgian villas, Peter Moro's house, which is this white roof here, flat roof, and Holgate, which is span flats. Ian Nairn in 1966 did a BBC documentary, and he was there in this corner, and he said, I can't see anywhere else in London where this is happening so well, because you have 4 distinct periods, all built to their time. They are all good, and nobody's upset. They are all doing their job, and they are all serving different people. And then as a bonus, I'll just show you Span South Row. So this is from our IBA Span archives. And that's a drawing they used for the public inquiry, which, they eventually won. And this is a photo montage after it being built. So the edge on the left is the Paragon, the crescent, Paragon House. The terrace in the middle had been completely damaged by a bomb. And, this is Spence saying, we can mix, we can fit, but we are designing for today. Thank you.